On July 23rd, 2552, the winter contingency was activated as Covenant forces made planetfall. Within roughly a month, on August 30th, 2552, the planet Reach fell and was glassed by the Covenant's military. The Covenant's goals were clear. They sought out the total annihilation of the human race and our planet due to their radical religious beliefs surrounding the Forerunners. On September 19th, 2552, the Pillar of Autumn, a ship that survived the glassing of Reach, arrived at Installation 04, alternatively known as Halo. In our original timeline, John 117, also known as the Master Chief, or the Demon to Covenant forces, would prevent them from using Installation 04 for their religious crusade. Unknown to them, that would wipe out the entire galaxy, as that's what Halo's original intention was. Thanks to this critical victory, humanity would ultimately win the Covenant-Human War, due in part to the Master Chief. However, this time, the demon wouldn't land on Halo. Chief, who previously inflicted catastrophic damage on the Covenant and its military forces, was missing in action. But every story needs its hero. It's just sometimes the hero that we want isn't the hero that we get. The Covenant's demon was an angel this time. The angel, one of the Emperor's angels, Lieutenant Titus, former captain of the 2nd Company of the Ultramarines. Could Lieutenant Titus of Space Marine 2 beat Halo Combat Evolved? And spoilers here, it's not a definitive yes. Crazy, I know. What's even crazier is I've never talked about Halo on my YouTube channel, which is funny because I've been a Halo fan longer than I've liked anime in general. So I think it's finally time I do something about it. So I only feel like it's natural putting my oldest love for a sci-fi universe against my newest love for a sci-fi universe. Not only that, I can actually make a crossover fight with Warhammer 40K, which is quickly becoming one of my favorite media franchises just in general, just because of how crazy the lore is and just the overall aesthetic. I kid you not, my paint for my minis came in yesterday, at the time I am recording this. So with the preamble and hype out of the way, hello, my name is Metas. Walk with me. So before I get into the crazier and heavier details of both universes in general here, before they start to go head to head, I feel like I need to clarify a few things. First off, this video is not strictly just power scaling. How I like to do it here on my channel is half power scaling, half story, half character is how I usually tend to do it, as I feel like it engages you guys, the audience, a lot more with said topic, when it's not strictly power scaling. Furthermore, when looking at both these universes, I will be kind of doing a limited look at both. As first off, Halo is incredibly deep, and second off, Warhammer 40K is incredibly deep. So to prevent me from going on very long tangents here trying to explain the lore, I'll just be strictly looking at the games here, with some minor help from the books to fill in some of the holes. So with that out of the way, let's talk about Titus. So in a funny way, similar to John, Titus actually has a pretty interesting childhood as well, and some quirks about him that make him an extremely good soldier. Within the secret level episode, we learn that Titus is a child without fear and brimming with rage. Metaurus, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly there, thought it would be a good idea to indoctrinate him into the Astartes if he had the genetic potential to do so, and he did. And to a certain degree, looking at what he says within the episode, he's actually kind of scared, funny enough, of what Titus could eventually become. And he was entirely correct. After 150 standard years of being an Ultramarine, he eventually becomes the captain of this 2nd Company before the events of Space Marine 1. To put some context into perspective of that of being an Ultramarine and being the captain of the 2nd Company is that, well, the Ultramarines are the Swiss Army knife of the Imperium of mankind, being basically good at everything, but not exceedingly good at everything. So in a layman's terms, they are the Master Chief of the 20 Astarte legions, which makes them one of the better ones. Looking deeper into it, out of the 10 companies, the 2nd Company is the foremost battle company, made up of Astartes that want to become veterans of said legion. So they will try their hardest in proving that, relying on elements of surprise and their overwhelming transhuman strength to utterly destroy anything that shows up in front of them. However, sometimes they can be a little bit reckless. Looking back at the secret level episode, that is still clearly evident. Taking a step back and looking at the context of what Titus is doing, at least within these early years of being an Astartes, he is basically the captain, so the best of his company, which is the best of almost the entire legion the Imperium of Man can produce. So Metaurus was right. He should be scared of Titus, because Titus is basically the near gold standard of what an Astartes should be. Also, I might mention, Titus is extremely young to be a captain. Captains usually are much older than 150 standard years, so not only that, he is also a prodigy among all of these badasses. asses, which is shockingly similar to the Master Chief John 117, as their lives are eerily similar to each other, at least how they are perceived by their respective governments and leaders. And that's all before Space Marine 1. Getting into Space Marine, things get kind of interesting, but not too crazy. Titus, his battle company, the Astra Militarum, and the Order Xenos come to the planet to defend it from Grimskull, a war boss of the Orcs, to halt their Wah! And I kid you not, that's how it's actually supposed to be pronounced. It gets me every single time. I love the Orcs. Titus eventually fights him in one-on-one combat and does beat him, backing up the previous points of his skill level, as war bosses should be at an Astartes level, if not higher, considering the fact that the bigger the Orc, the stronger the Orc. And over the course of the game fighting the Orcs, Titus also fights the Warp and its spawn, beating demons and sorcerers alike over the course of the game, who in some interpretations can be outright just stronger than Astartes, or be somewhere near their level, giving more credibility to Titus. Thankfully, Titus was able to beat the Psychic Scourge and the Wah. However, though, and sadly, Titus, while physically powerful and overall being one of the Ultramarines' best, can't defeat something within Space Marine 1, that being the government. Funny enough, as Leandros, one of his fuck-ass company members, accuses them of heresy and gets the Inquisition on the second company's asses, as Titus is charged with the crimes of being corrupted by the Warp, as throughout Space Marine 2, he was doing a lot of things that were not Codex compliant and was pulling off feats against the Warp that no other Space Marine at that point should have been capable of, as nobody can resist the Warp, except Titus, for some reason that is still not explained to this very day, even in Space Marine 2. And in order to save his company, Titus allows himself to be arrested, tortured, and questioned by the Inquisition. However, in a funny turn of events over the course of hundreds of years, Thrax, the Inquisitioner that arrested and tortured Titus, was actually corrupted by chaos and just hated Space Marines. Thankfully though, the Grey Knights killed him, and anybody who was prisoner was actually sent to the Death Watch to be checked for heresy. And well, funny enough, not actually really funny, Titus was 100% heresy free. Thank you, Leandros, for wasting all of our time, you loser. However, it doesn't get any better from here, as Titus spent so long cooped up and being interrogated that he thought the Ultramarines didn't want him anymore, leading him down a pretty dark road. However, in reality, the Ultramarines missed him dearly, but his skills would not be wasted, as the Black Watch will always be looking for new recruits when it comes to Astartes. So Titus, now taking the name Nullus, would join the Black Watch as a Black Shield, somebody who has forgoed his chapter's colors, and will serve under very special missions to kill alien races under the Black Watch's order. And the order is made up of veteran Astartes or near veteran Astartes of a multitude of different chapters. So Nullus at this time is even gaining greater knowledge of how to actually deal with alien races and becoming stronger as an Astartes. And depending on how you look at Titus's age, as Nullus at this time being nearly 400 years old right before the events of Space Marine 2, he would have spent more time with the Death Watch than the Ultramarines. So basically what I'm saying here is he would have already been a veteran class Astartes by this point in his life. And being surrounded by so many crazy individuals within Death Watch, I don't think that's a crazy take to say. Oddly enough too, this also parallels Chief again. Even though they're heroes, sometimes the respective governments see them as rogue, or due to being in relation to something or somebody that's not seen in the greatest light, they are also perceived as bad and have to go through some type of redemption arc. They really just be hating on their goats. I genuinely don't understand these universes' governments. They actually just suck. So moving on to Space Marine 2, this is where I personally feel like the scaling gets really interesting for the most part, as there is a lot of implications that the viewer has to infer to see how strong Titus is. And for the most part, at least in my interpretation, Titus in Space Marine 2 might just be the strongest version of Titus we have seen so far, and will continuously get stronger over time. In the beginning of the game, Nullus would fight a Tyranid Carnifex, which is a Tyranid bioform that is quite literally just meant for complete and utter slaughter of enemy forces, a hulking behemoth. And on a technicality, this makes actually a hell of a lot of sense. The Tyranids are actually perceived to be a worser threat than the Warp and the Dark Gods that lay within there that affect the current physical plane of reality. So Titus, or Nullus at this time, dying to a Tyranid canonically makes sense. He wasn't going to win that fight. However, Nullus survives, and only survives because he becomes a Primaris Space Marine. Now, a Primaris Space Marine is a bit different than a regular Space Marine, as they are supposed to be an improved Space Marine designed by Rabute Gilliman, the Primarch of, funny enough, the Ultramarines. Now, it's never been outright stated how much stronger a Primaris Space Marine is to a Firstborn Space Marine. Hell, technically some people make jokes that the Primaris Space Marines die more than the Firstborns. However, not in the case for Titus. It's implied through the early portions of the game fighting the Tyranid with Gadriel and Charon that they are able to fight Tyranid Carnifex and other higher base life forms within the Tyranid fleet that Nullus and Space Marine 1 Titus probably couldn't. What makes it even better is it's also implied that Titus is still recovering from the Primaris surgery. So Primaris Titus is not at his maximum 100% just yet. And over the course of the game, Titus is able to fend off the Tyranid fleet, then comes to blows with the Thousand Suns, followers of the Dark God Tzeentch, who use the Power Scourge to open up a rift, letting a Lord of Change into the physical plane. With the help of the Chapter Master Malleus Calgar, Charon, and Gadriel, and Titus, they're able to hold off the Lord of Change until Titus is able to close the portal with his bare hands, defeating the Psychic Scourge once more, being a really good showcase to Titus's either durability or just warp resistances yet again. Now, when it comes to general scaling involving speed, attack potency, and durability, I will be generalizing here as I don't want to get too nerdy. Talking about speed first, this one's actually really easy. There have been many cases throughout the novels and books of Ultramarines and just Marines in general being at least subsonic to at least hypersonic in terms of combat speed, as most Space Marines share some general stats between each other, so Titus should be capable of these speeds. There's also been cases of FTL reaction speeds applying to Astartes veterans. However, this might be too individualistic and not a general thing over the massive number of veteran Astartes. Now, durability and attack potency kind of get weird. In terms of the durability department, Astartes with weaker armor compared to the Mark 10 power armor Titus is wearing, at least within this video, is that they have been able to survive grenades that are way more powerful than modern day ones, and even enhanced lightning strikes from Chaos Sorcerers time and again. However, sometimes Space Marines die just to a normal stabbing. So it's either you get really lucky and instantly kill a Space Marine through a very hot energy blade, or it takes an entire city block to kill him, which might be overkill, and they probably cap out at like large building level, just looking at what the Necron can actually do to the Astartes with their antimatter weapons. Now, when it comes to attack potency, here it's probably going to be kind of capped because I'm not going to give, like, you know, Titus the overpowered stuff. For the most part, I will be giving him bolter rifles and power swords for the most part in terms of his military equipment. And that stuff usually caps out around like building level, as that stuff is able to kill Chaos Space Marines. So building level to building level plus is a general good area for Titus here. Now, in terms of actual physical prowess, it's more than likely the same, as Space Marines are able to beat other Space Marines and even Chaos Space Marines with their bare hands for the most part. So Titus should be okay here in this general area. So Titus's overall stats would be hypersonic plus, attack potency and durability being somewhere in building level to building level plus to, at most, in my opinion, large building level plus. Overall, pretty comparable to Chief, if not better if you want to use higher end scaling, and in some regards does actually mirror the Master Chief, which in my opinion makes him perfect for a scenario just like this. Now, if you're actually liking what I'm doing here on the channel and want to consider in supporting me in making these videos, become a channel member. It helps me a hell of a lot more than you would know. So if you do, thank you. So with the yapping out of the way and the power scaling section done, let's put Lieutenant Titus in Halo Combat Evolved. Now, for the sake of fun, I'm actually going to place Titus within the second level of Halo Combat Evolved, titled Halo, just to put him on the Halo ring instantly. Now, there is going to be a few caveats that I need to kind of emphasize here before I go crazy. First off, I'm just going to assume Cortana is already in his systems and somehow can get into his armor through some type of USB port to be funny, because without that, this scenario gets a lot more confusing, because without Cortana, a lot of key events just don't play out correctly the way I want them to, because I want Titus to experience the full Halo ring just like Chief did. So on some technicality, Cortana some way is able to communicate with Titus as Chief is gone and needs somebody else to replace him. And to cut a long-winded talk down, the reason why Cortana would probably end up trusting Titus, or at least using Titus for the benefit of the UNSC, is because, well, they don't have a Spartan and they're running low on resources. So the giant 10-foot blue Marine is their best option as of currently. However, vice versa, Titus has problems with Cortana. Titus comes from a society that absolutely hates AI, as AI within the Warhammer 40K universe actually tried to betray humanity long before the events of Warhammer 40K. So off the bat, Titus wouldn't like her. However, this is where the Ultramarine background comes in clutch. While the Ultramarines did make the rules of engagement that most Astartes follow, that being the Codex, Titus isn't known for following it. That leads me to believe when it comes to basically societal ideas about certain rules, you can kind of twist them a little bit. Not to mention mention the humans he'd probably be fond of, are currently being attacked by alien forces, activating the classic rule, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Plus, he's an Ultramarine and would love to help out these humans. It's kind of what they're known for and what Guilliman kind of teaches his Ultramarines. Not to mention the fact Guilliman, the Primarch, teams up with Xeno races all the time when the entire Imperium's ideas are to kill the Xeno. So, you know, things can change depending on the scenario. Titus is literally made in the Primarch's image, so I'm just saying it's not totally out of the ordinary for Titus to trust the UNSC and Cortana to at least some limited degree when placed in this war. And even if you take it strategically speaking, Titus has a better chance of survival and getting resources from the UNSC than the Covenant, because the Covenant would probably want Titus dead, regardless of how they view this weird stranger. So when it comes to the overall objective of the Halo mission, Titus would be able to do it. Now, I won't go too crazy into the scaling of the Covenant just yet. I'll wait till Truth and Reconciliation. But when it comes to the objective of searching the other lifeboats and protecting the soldiers, Titus would be completely fine. There's really nothing other than maybe the Banshees in the air that might pose a threat. Let's be serious here. Did we really think a Jackal or a Grunt is gonna like scare Titus? Hell no, that's not gonna happen. Now, an Elite might pose a challenge, but past that, the only real big threat here would be a Banshee in the sky because of its plasma cannons that could potentially hurt Titus's armor. But past that, I think he can beat this mission pretty easily. I don't think there's really any struggling here at all. Now, within Truth and Reconciliation, this is where things get pretty interesting as we see the Covenant in its full force now, with all enemies at play. So like I previously said, I don't think the Grunts or the Jackals are really gonna provide Titus with any like major cause of concern. Even looking at their weaponry, the only thing that those guys have that would maybe cause Titus to be like, oh shit, would be probably a plasma grenade or multiple plasma grenades. That's basically about it. I don't think a plasma pistol or a plasma rifle are really gonna cause Titus some stress here. I just don't think so. Now, I do think a Shade or a Needler could damage Titus, but not to a significant degree that Titus is overwhelmed or dies from it. I do think Titus's military experience here, being well over 300 years old at bare minimum, will give him the context not to be hit by any of this stuff if the situation allows him to. Now, an Elite paired up with these weapons might actually cause some issue. Even John from time to time struggles with Elites, as they're much more skilled than a Grunt or a Jackal individually. So paired up with the right equipment, it might cause Titus some struggle depending on the scenario and the environment he is currently in. However, these next two definitely have a chance of killing him if not careful. That being Golden Elites and of course Hunters. Golden Elites being some of the strongest elites you can find just in general within the Covenant due to their military skill and close quarters combat. As they might be generals, question mark? I actually really don't know here. I tried to look into it and the Golden Elites seem kind of like a pseudo general / field marshal role, at least within Combat Evolved. Regardless though, they are extremely skillful and are probably one of the strongest opponents in the game in terms of a 1v1, so Titus would actually have to try here regardless of scenario. Personally though, I think right before saving Captain Keyes, Titus and the Golden Elite in Truth and Reconciliation would actually have a pretty cool 1v1, at least in my head. Now, moving on to the Hunters, this is probably going to be Titus's most difficult matchup when it occurs, as physically these guys actually overpower Spartans all the time and can kill them pretty easily thanks to their fuel rod shots. So if Titus were to be caught off guard or the double team were actually to overpower him between the dual hunters that occur every time within the game and are just known for canonically, Titus could potentially take a lot of damage here and or die. However, comparing him to Chief from earlier, I think he should be okay for the most part. And by the end of the mission, I do think Titus would actually be able to rescue Captain Keyes, pretty similar to Chief. Of course, an interaction would occur because, well, the Spartan that originally was on the ship with him is now gone and has now been replaced with an Astartes. However, I don't think anything too crazy would happen as Cortana trusts Lieutenant Titus to a certain degree, so I think Captain Keyes would as well. And if anything were to happen, technically because of his background being an Ultramarine, Titus would diplomatically be able to solve any problems they might have in terms of leadership or trust, as Ultramarines kind of practice this when not on duty. And another way to phrase it, Titus would be able to sweet talk Captain Keyes if he needed to. And with the captain secured, the UNSC now try to stop the Covenant from controlling the Halo ring. Silent Cartographer. Nothing happens. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, even in context within the original in-game universe, this is just a standard military operation that is just Cortana, help me find these switches. It's a very boring mission. I'm gonna be real, personally speaking. Even adding Titus to the scenario, I don't really think changes much. I'm just gonna be honest, maybe there's some more dialogue between Titus and Cortana, if anything, but Titus just flicks on some switches That's basically it. Nothing really happens here. Unlike Assault the Control Room, where personally, I think a lot of drama would take place between Titus and Cortana. Now, before that, of course, looking at the Covenant versus Titus in this scenario, in specific with this mission, the only problems here would be the tanks and the Banshees, which have the potential to kill him if they land a good shot. However, if Chief was able to do it, I doubt Titus would struggle here either. The only concerning thing here would be, could Titus fit himself into a Banshee? Yes, he would be able to. The elite on average are in between like 8 to 10 feet tall, and that's generally the size where Titus is around, so I don't know why he wouldn't be able to. He might be a little bit too wide, but past that, I don't think it's a problem. And especially by this point, would Titus run out of ammo, or would there be problems using the UNSC's weaponry? Personally, no. Titus would be able to actually manufacture his own equipment if he needed to, thanks to his Astartes background. But since he's an Ultramarine, he'd actually want to figure out how this universe's weapons work in order to better himself. So in reality, there really is no issue here on the battlefield. He should be all clear. Where the drama eventually hits its peak is at the end of this mission. Once Cortana gets to the control room and eventually is plugged in and starts freaking out about the flood and tells Titus in this scenario to go help Captain Keyes without giving him the full details, unlike Chief, who just, did it, because up until that point in the relationship, Chief knew Cortana for years and isn't going to question the super smart AI. Unlike Titus, who would. And mind you, this is the guy who grew up in a society that didn't like AI. So they're already off on a bad foot. What makes it worse is Cortana is not telling him critical information, which Titus has a massive pet peeve about. It's quite literally the main focus of both of his games. So Titus would be yelling at Cortana saying, I want to know what the Halo ring does, and I want to know what the hell Captain Keyes is doing that is so critical that you are telling me to leave without giving me the proper info, etc, etc. So we basically have two stubborn bitches who ain't doing shit. And since Cortana is the smarter one here, I think she would eventually cave in first and would tell Titus what is going on here. And Titus's jaw would of course be on the floor after learning that the Halo ring's entire purpose is to basically get rid of life, and in tandem with the other Halo rings would completely reset the galaxy and all sentient life. B, there is a species of parasite so powerful that the entire purpose of the Halo rings was to get rid of them, in which it failed. In a really funny way, I can imagine Titus going, yes, I understand, and then proceeds to bolt it in the other direction going, fuck, shit, fuck, shit, fuck. It'd be funny. Moving on to my favorite mission in all of Halo history, 343 Guilty Spark. So this is a Titus solo mission while Cortana is still in the control room. So what I think would happen here is Titus would die. You thought he was gonna live in this entire video? No. As a power scaler, I have to implore you, audience, that this is the Flood we are talking about. One of, if not the craziest alien species ever. Most universes humans make in fiction, where the people or the creatures that operate within that fictional universe usually have a nervous system. The Flood exploit all of that. They seep into your body and manipulate you from the inside out, turning you into one of those monstrosities, continuously making more Flood until it spreads across the galaxy. And it doesn't just stop at physical, biological life forms. Eventually, at one point, it even starts to infect AI and machines. Sure, Titus with any number of weapons, or maybe even his bare fists, could fight a pod infector, or a Flood combat form, or a Flood carrier form. Chief was able to do it, of course. However, it just takes one Flood spore into the lungs, and it's game over. No amount of military combat experience could prepare you for fighting something you can't see nor defend yourself against. The only reason why Master Chief even was able to get out of there in this specific scenario was because of his luck. Chief has this mystical or meta-contextual scaling to him that allows him to kind of transcend the limits of his own universe, allowing him to win. What I'm trying to say here is he's just really, really lucky because Bungie gave him the ability to be lucky. That's the only reason why he was able to get out of this mission alive and was able to beat Halo Combat Evolved. Titus doesn't have that here. But since I'm writing this, we're going to keep on moving forward and say that the energy shield you see within Space Marine 2 is actually canonical, and every Mark 10 power armor actually has some limited energy shield protections, which should be able to deflect Flood spores. You totally don't need to be a captain. Every 9th company, 10th company recruit has energy shields on them. Totally. We'll say that so we can get to them all. I am the Emperor, this is my will. Or I'm Zinch. I don't know. I'm fucking with Titus right now. So getting to the end of the mission game really isn't like going to be a struggle. Like I said previously, I don't think any of the flood forms are really going to like cost Titus like a lot of pressure. He's dealt with the Tyranids before and how they act. So like, if anything, he's just back home again, fighting like a worse version of the Tyranid again. And of course, Guilty Spark would show up and teleport Titus out of there so they can go get the index for the Halo ring so they can set it off. However, since Titus knows what the Halo ring is about, I don't know if the library mission actually happens properly, leading to a snowball effect of I don't know what happens for the rest of the game. Titus wouldn't like Guilty Spark. He's an AI, and especially in this case, since Titus would probably ask him, what are we doing? We're gonna be like, we're basically setting off the Halo ring, and since Titus already knows what that entails, Titus wouldn't let him do anything. So I don't know if he kills him early, waits till he gets the index, and then in the control room with Cortana eventually kills him there, which then leads into this really weird thing of, do they actually need to do the mission 2 betrayals in order to disable Halo's primary weapon, which then would save them on time, leading to a really weird effect of, could they save Keyes before he turns into like a flood carrier or something? Before then, we don't really know the specifics of that. He could already be turned, but then would save on a massive amount of time leading to the Maw, and with 343 Guilty Spark not being there means that that mission would go way smoother. And depending on how you see the snowball effect, there could possibly be a timeline in which Keyes survives leading into the events of Halo 2. Sorry if that was a bit fast, but I'll personally describe how I think it would go down here, but I can say that there are options. There is no chance in hell during the library that Titus would let that guy walk away. There's no way. However, I think Titus would use 343 Guilty Spark to get the index and then kill him. I just don't think Titus would let an AI like that with all this potential destroy a massive amount of life on a massive light year scale just poof away. There's no shot. Titus is going to wreck his shit in that control room, flat out. So with 343 Guilty Spark out of the way, does 2 betrayals need to happen? In this version of the story, I don't think so. The only reason why they do that is just in case they don't blow up the ring. Knowing Titus and his character, I think he is pretty confident that he will survive and the ring will blow up, so they don't need to do these extra precautionary steps just in case they fail. Furthermore, I think Titus would also want to save the chain of command even more so for these humans, in the long run rather than the short. But if you do think 2 betrayals still ends up happening regardless of what I'm saying, the story basically ends the same way that it would originally within Halo Combat Evolved. Entering Keyes, this mission for the most part shouldn't be too crazy to defeat in terms of enemies, as now we're basically seeing the entire roster of the whole game in this mission. But if Titus was able to defeat everybody previously, I don't think anything really changes here. And even if we skip 2 betrayals and certain events in 343 Guilty Spark go the way they do, I still think Keyes is basically dead. There is no way to save him at this point. Even if they have done it faster and he can talk for a lot longer, Keyes will need to die here. There's no way of avoiding it. Just, he has to die. But I do think Titus would give him a proper send-off, much more than Chief did. I think he would maybe give him a speech or recognize his honors as a captain. That's just due to the fact that he can actually talk for a lot longer, unlike the original timeline. So that brings us to the last mission in Halo, the Maw. However, unlike the original timeline, this one goes a lot faster and a lot easier this time around. Like I've been previously saying, without 343 Guilty Spark to mess around with Cortana and her setup, the only real issue here would be the Spec Ops units that the Covenant deployed, so the ring isn't destroyed. But he's been able to fight those guys previously in different missions before. The only real major difference here is the grunts with fuel rod cannons, but he's been able to fight grunts before and even hunters, so I don't think there is a problem here. I think Lieutenant Titus and Cortana can actually get off the ring pretty easily here. And that's my take on if Lieutenant Titus could beat Halo Combat Evolved. If Titus doesn't die to the flood, he'd be able to probably get through it much faster than Chief in the second half, securing the victory for the UNSC and getting him and Cortana out of there. And I think that's all I really have to say. This was genuinely a really fun video to record and write. This was just honestly super fascinating to me personally. I love both these sci-fi franchises, and just putting them up against each other like this is just honestly really dope in my mind. I'm a giant kid in a candy store right now. I love it. So with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe. Consider joining the channel. It supports me a hell of a lot, and thank you if you do. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen. Deuces.